The late October sun cast long shadows across my bedroom carpet. I sat by the window, knitting a small sweater for Melissa's youngest, when I heard her and Ethan talking in hushed tones downstairs. "Has she signed the papers yet?" Melissa's voice, sharper than I'd ever heard it, carried up the stairwell. "We need to get this done before winter. Sell the house, cash out her accounts, and get her into Sunset Grove while there's still." Her voice trailed off, but the meaning hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. Sunset Grove, that dreadful retirement community on the outskirts of town. The one Melissa had sworn I'd never have to live in. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ethan murmured something I couldn't quite make out, but Melissa's reply sliced through the quiet. "We need the money, Ethan. Think of the down payment on the lake house. Think of the boat. The lake house, the boat. Purchased with my money, with the proceeds from the sale of my home, the home my late husband, Charles, and I had built together, brick by brick." A wave of nausea washed over me. I pressed my hand to my mouth, the yarn slipping from my numb fingers. They were talking about me as if I wasn't even there, as if I were some inconvenient burden, a problem to be solved. "She's getting forgetful," Melissa said, her voice laced with a false sweetness that made my stomach churn. "It's for her own good. Sunset Grove has excellent care, and a hefty price tag, no doubt. A price tag they intended to pay with my life savings." I closed my eyes, the image of Charles' smiling face flashing before me. He'd trusted me to manage our finances, to secure our future, and I'd done just that. I'd worked hard, invested wisely, and ensured we had a comfortable nest egg for our retirement. A retirement I was now being robbed of. I thought of my grandchildren, their bright, innocent faces. Were they being factored into this equation, or were they just another pawn in Melissa and Ethan's game? The anger began to simmer, a low burn in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't how family was supposed to treat each other. I'd always been there for Melissa, even after Charles passed. I'd helped her with the children, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and even contributed financially when Ethan's business ventures went south. And this was how they repaid me, by plotting to steal my home and shove me into a sterile and personal facility. I opened my eyes, the knitting needles clutched tight in my hands. The soft wool felt rough and unforgiving against my skin. The sadness was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by something else, resolve. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them steal my future. And I certainly wouldn't let them jeopardize the future of my grandchildren. We just need to convince her it's the best option. Ethan's voice drifted up from downstairs, pulling me back to the present. She trusts us. Trust. They thought I trusted them. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. They had no idea how misplaced their confidence was. I picked up the dropped yarn, my fingers working with renewed purpose. The sweater I was knitting was a vibrant shade of blue, the color of the ocean, the color of hope. I would need all the hope I could muster in the coming days. I had a plan to make, a plan to protect myself, to protect my grandchildren, and to make sure Melissa and Ethan understood the true meaning of family loyalty. And the first step was a phone call. I reached for the phone on my nightstand, my hand steady, my gaze fixed on the setting sun. The afternoon light cast long shadows across my bedroom carpet. I sat on the edge of my bed, the floral bedspread cool beneath my fingertips. How could they, my own daughter, Melissa, and Ethan, the man she'd chosen? The words I'd overheard echoed in my mind, sharp and cold as ice shards. Once Mom's in Whispering Pines, Ethan had said, his voice low and conspiratorial, "We can finally sell this place," and I hadn't needed to hear the rest. Whispering Pines, that overpriced retirement community Melissa had been so insistent I visit. "It's for your own good, Mom," she'd said, her smile too bright, too eager. "Think of all the friends you'll make." I looked around the room, at the antique dresser my grandmother had given me, at the framed photos of my late husband, George, and Melissa as a child. This house held a lifetime of memories, of laughter and love, of quiet evenings spent with George by the fireplace, and they were planning to sell it, to discard it like a worn-out shoe, all so they could get their hands on my money. A wave of nausea washed over me. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked over to the window. The backyard, once a vibrant garden under George's care, was now overgrown and neglected, just like everything else I'd entrusted to Melissa and Ethan. They'd promised to maintain it, promised to take care of things while I recovered from my hip surgery. Empty promises. I remembered the conversation I'd had with Melissa just last week. "Mom, we're a little short this month," she'd said, her voice tight with a manufactured anxiety. "Would you mind covering the mortgage payment?" I hadn't minded. Of course. They were family. I'd always helped them out when they needed it. After George passed, I'd even given Melissa power of attorney, trusting her implicitly. Foolish, naive old woman, I thought bitterly. My hand trembled as I reached for the small, silver-framed photo on my nightstand. It was George, smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, George," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "What have I done?" He would have seen through them in an instant. He always had a knack for spotting insincerity, for recognizing a wolf in sheep's clothing. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, trying to quell the rising panic. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them take everything I'd worked for, everything George and I had built together. There had to be a way out, a way to protect myself, a way to ensure they didn't get away with this. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out a small, worn address book. My fingers flipped through the pages, pausing on a familiar name, Martha Jensen. Martha had been my closest friend since college, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had also lost her husband a few years back. More importantly, Martha was a retired lawyer. I reached for the phone, my resolve hardening with each dial tone. "Martha," I said when she answered, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's Margaret. I need your help." I paused, hesitant. This was difficult to admit, even to a close friend. I think my daughter is trying to take advantage of me." Martha listened patiently as I recounted the overheard conversation, the growing suspicion, the mounting evidence of their deceit. "Don't worry, Margaret," she said when I was finished. "We'll figure this out. Come over tomorrow morning, and we'll discuss your options." I hung up the phone, a sliver of hope cutting through the despair. Martha's words had a calming effect, a reassurance that I wasn't alone in this fight. I looked back at the photo of George, his kind eyes seeming to offer a silent encouragement. I would honor his memory. I decided I would protect what was rightfully mine. I wouldn't let them steal my future, and I certainly wouldn't let them squander the legacy I intended to leave for my grandchildren. The thought of my grandchildren, still so young and innocent, ignited a new fire within me. Melissa and Ethan might think they were clever, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: a grandmother's fierce love. They had underestimated me, and they would soon learn that underestimating Margaret Hayes was a very costly mistake. The seeds of a plan began to take root, a plan that would not only secure my own future, but also safeguard the inheritance I intended for my grandchildren. I had a feeling tomorrow would be a very interesting day. Rain lashed against the window pane, mimicking the turmoil brewing inside me over the past few months. The subtle shifts in Melissa and Ethan's behavior had become impossible to ignore. It started small, a request for help with a temporary setback, a slightly larger grocery bill charged to my account. "Mom, you wouldn't mind covering the electricity this month, would you? We're a little short," Melissa had said, her smile strained. Of course, I hadn't minded. I wanted to help. They were my family, but the requests became more frequent, the amounts larger. Ethan's new business venture seemed to be a bottomless pit, swallowing my savings bit by bit. "Just a little more, Margaret," he'd assure me, "and we'll be back on our feet." He never specified what kind of feet those were, or how far down they'd sunk. My unease grew with each passing day, a knot tightening in my stomach. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like it was slowly being taken over. My favorite armchair had been replaced with Ethan's oversized recliner. My collection of antique teacups, a gift from my late husband, had been relegated to the attic, replaced by a sleek, modern coffee maker Ethan insisted on having. "It makes a better brew, Mom," Melissa explained, though I knew the real reason was the teacups didn't fit their minimalist aesthetic. I started noticing small changes in their attitude towards me, too. The casual disregard for my opinions, the impatience in their voices when I spoke. "Mom, you wouldn't understand," Melissa snapped one evening when I questioned Ethan's latest investment. It was a stark contrast to the loving, attentive daughter I had raised. The daughter who used to bring me flowers from the garden and read me stories by the fire. Where had that girl gone? The subtle digs at my age became more frequent. "Mom, maybe you should rest," Melissa would say, ushering me away from the kitchen when I offered to help with dinner. Or, "Mom, are you sure you can manage those stairs?" when I went to retrieve something from the attic. Each comment, each gesture, chipped away at my sense of self-worth, leaving me feeling increasingly small and insignificant in my own home. One afternoon, while pretending to nap on the living room sofa, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. "Once Margaret's gone, we can finally renovate this place," Ethan was saying. My heart pounded in my chest. "Gone? Where did they expect me to go?" Melissa's voice, low and hushed, replied. "And we can finally use that money to take that trip to Europe we've been talking about." Europe, my money, my retirement savings, the money I had painstakingly saved over a lifetime of hard work, was destined for their extravagant vacations. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just taking advantage of me financially. They were planning my future, a future that didn't include me. I lay there, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. But my mind was racing. How could I have been so blind? How could my own daughter, the child I had nurtured and loved, treat me this way? The hurt was profound, a deep ache that settled in my chest. I had given them everything, supported them through thick and thin, and this was how they repaid me, by plotting my demise. The following weeks were a blur of quiet observation. I watched them, studying their movements, their conversations, piecing together the extent of their deception. I realized, with growing horror, that they had been systematically draining my accounts, using my money to fund their lavish lifestyle. The new car Ethan drove, the designer clothes Melissa wore, the expensive dinners they enjoyed, all paid for with my hard-earned money. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could they be so callous, so greedy? I spent hours in my room, staring out the window, the rain a constant companion to my grief. The world outside seemed bleak and unforgiving, mirroring the landscape of my own heart. I felt betrayed, abandoned, and utterly alone. But amidst the despair, a flicker of resolve began to ignite. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them take everything I had worked for. I had to fight back. I owed it to myself and to the memory of my late husband to protect what was rightfully mine. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan to reclaim my life and secure my future. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to see it through. The quiet, unassuming grandmother they thought they knew was about to surprise them. They had underestimated me, and they would soon learn the price of their betrayal. The rain continued to fall, but now, instead of despair, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. The game was on. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, blurring the view of the overgrown rose bushes I'd tended for years. The Bahamas sun Melissa and Ethan had been basking in felt a million miles away. Back from their business trip, they'd claimed, though the tan lines on their necks told a different story. And then there was the credit card statement. It arrived that very morning, a crisp white envelope containing a sickening truth. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the rows of familiar charges: groceries, gas, the occasional online purchase. And then it hit me. A single charge for over $8,000 to a travel agency I'd never heard of. $8,000. My stomach churned. That was nearly 2 months of my living expenses, gone in a single swipe. "Melissa," I called out, my voice thinner than I intended. She strolled into the kitchen, a mug of steaming coffee in her hand, a relaxed smile on her face. "Morning, Mom." "What's up?" Ethan trailed behind her, still sporting his vacation casual attire, khaki shorts, and a brightly colored polo shirt that looked jarringly out of place against the gray backdrop of the day. I held up the statement, the offending lines circled in red ink. "Can you explain this?" Melissa's smile faltered. She peered at the statement, her brow furrowing in mock confusion. "Oh, that must be an error. I'll call the bank later." Ethan chimed in, his tone breezy. "Probably just some system glitch. Happens all the time." He reached for the coffee pot, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. "A glitch for $8,000, I asked," my voice rising. "To a travel agency." The rose bushes outside seemed to sway in agreement, their thorny branches mirroring the prickle of anger rising within me. Melissa sighed, a dramatic display of exasperation. "Mom, honestly, You worry too much. It's just a mistake. I'll sort it out." She reached for the statement, but I pulled it back. "No, Melissa. I want a proper explanation." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the blatant disregard, the casual lies. It was about the creeping realization that the people I loved, the people I trusted, were taking advantage of me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I'd welcomed them into my home, shared my life, my finances, believing I was helping them through a difficult time. Now I saw the truth. They weren't struggling. They were thriving. At my expense. "Mom, look," Melissa said, her voice laced with impatience. "Ethan had some bonus points from his work. We used them to book a last-minute trip. It was a surprise for me. The travel agency must have charged your card by mistake." Her explanation was flimsy, riddled with holes, yet she delivered it with an air of practiced innocence. Ethan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, totally my bad. Should have checked the details more carefully." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt patronizing rather than comforting. I stared at them, my mind racing. Bonus points, last-minute trip. It was all a lie. I could see it in their eyes, and the subtle shift of their body language. The casual indifference with which they dismissed my concerns was more telling than any confession. "I see," I said quietly, my voice betraying none of the turmoil within. I folded the statement and tucked it into my pocket. "Well, I suppose mistakes happen." I turned to the window, pretending to admire the rain-soaked garden. Inside, however, a cold resolve was hardening. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal, and I wouldn't stand for it. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last vestiges of my naivete. I watched Melissa and Ethan leave the kitchen, their carefree laughter echoing in the hallway. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought they could continue to bleed me dry, using my kindness and generosity as their personal ATM. They were wrong. The game had changed. I may have been quiet. I may have seemed vulnerable, but I was far from powerless. I had plans of my own, plans they couldn't even begin to imagine. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen now, a steady, rhythmic pulse against the backdrop of the storm. It was a sound of normalcy, of routine, but nothing was normal anymore. Everything had changed, and the change was just beginning. The $8,000 was a drop in the bucket compared to what I had planned. They thought they were taking a vacation. They had no idea what kind of journey I was about to send them on. Rain lashed against the window of my little suite, a gray Tuesday afternoon mirroring the grayness in my heart. Melissa breezed in, all smiles, a crisp legal document clutched in her hand. "Mom," she began, her voice overly bright, "this is just a formality, really. It's a power of attorney. You know, just in case anything happens." Anything happens. The words echoed in my mind, hollow and chilling. I'd overheard enough in cases in the past few weeks to know exactly what kind of anything Melissa and Ethan were anticipating. My signature on a document that would hand them the keys to my life, to everything I'd worked for. "Oh, honey," I murmured, feigning a frail confusion. "My eyes aren't what they used to be. Could you just summarize it for me?" I needed time to think, Time to process the fresh wave of betrayal that was washing over me. Melissa, my own daughter, reducing my entire life to a signature on a piece of paper. Of course, Mom. Melissa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It just means I can handle your finances, make decisions for you, if you're unable to. She tapped the document impatiently. It's all very standard. Ethan's already signed one for me, you see. The implication hung heavy in the air. I was the vulnerable one, the one in need of managing. Ethan's such a dear. Taking care of all this, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I took the document, pretending to study it. The rain outside intensified, the drumming against the glass a frantic counterpoint to the slow burn of anger rising within me. Exactly, Melissa replied, relief evident in her tone. He's so good with these things. He can explain it all to you later, in detail. She patted my hand, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a seal on a deal. I'll just leave it here for you to look over. No rush. As soon as Melissa left, I sank back against the cushions, the legal document a heavy weight in my lap. I closed my eyes, the image of Melissa's eager face, Ethan's shadow lurking behind her, seared into my mind. The casual cruelty of their plan, their utter disregard for my feelings, hit me with a fresh wave of despair. They saw me not as a mother, a grandmother, but as a walking bank account waiting to be emptied. A few minutes later, I heard their voices from the hallway, hushed but distinct. She bought it, Ethan whispered. Hook, line, and sinker. Don't jinx it. Melissa hissed back. Once we have power of attorney, we can finally list the house. The house my late husband and I had poured our lives into. The house where we raised Melissa. The house filled with a lifetime of memories. They were going to sell it, toss me aside like a broken toy, all for a quick profit. And then Ethan continued, his voice dripping with avarice. We booked that trip. Think of it. Melissa, the Maldives, 5-star all the way. The Maldives, on my money. Where would I be? Some sterile retirement home, forgotten and alone. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The rain continued to fall, a relentless torrent mirroring the grief and anger churning within me. I sat there for a long time, the legal document growing cold in my hands. The betrayal was a physical ache, a deep, throbbing wound. But as the minutes ticked by, something else began to stir within me, a flicker of defiance, a spark of resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them steal my life, my memories, my future. They wanted a fight. They would get one. I wiped away a stray tear, a grim smile playing on my lips. They thought they were so clever, so cunning, but they had underestimated me. They had underestimated a mother's love, a grandmother's protective instinct. They thought they had me cornered, trapped, but I was just beginning. I had a few surprises of my own in store for them. I carefully folded the power of attorney document and placed it in my bedside drawer. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A sign, perhaps, that the storm had passed and a new day was dawning. A day of reckoning, a day for revenge. I reached for the phone, a plan already forming in my mind. It was time to make a call to an old friend, a call to a lawyer, a call that would change everything. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. That night, sleep evaded me. Melissa's words, "Mom's just a burden now," echoed in the quiet of my small suite. Ethan's callous agreement. "Once the house is sold, we can finally." The rest of his sentence hung in the air, unspoken, but brutally clear. I sat up in bed, the floral comforter heavy on my legs. A burden. After all these years, supporting them, helping with the children. This was their gratitude. I switched on the bedside lamp, the dim glow barely cutting through the darkness. Reaching for my glasses on the nightstand, I tried to focus on something, anything other than the raw hurt. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger in the glass. When had I become so invisible? I rose and padded across the worn carpet to the small desk tucked in the corner. The wood was scratched and faded, a testament to years of use, of bills paid and letters written. I opened the top drawer, rummaging through old photographs. There, tucked between a faded picture of my late husband, Richard, and a birthday card from my grandsons, was a small, leather-bound address book. My fingers traced the embossed letters, a familiar comfort in the unfamiliar turmoil. Richard always said, "Prepare for the worst, Margaret. Hope for the best, but always be prepared." I murmured to the empty room. He'd been a practical man, my Richard, and right now, his practicality felt like a lifeline. I flipped through the pages, the brittle paper whispering under my fingertips. So many names, so many memories. My gaze landed on a familiar entry. Beatrice Miller, attorney at law. Beatrice, my oldest friend, my confidant, and thankfully, a shrewd legal mind. Beatrice always knew how to cut through the nonsense. I whispered, a sliver of hope piercing the gloom. I found her number, a landline. Of course, Beatrice was old school like me. I need to call her, first thing in the morning. I decided, scribbling a note on a scrap of paper, before they make any irreversible decisions. The thought of them selling my home, the home Richard and I had built together, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a repository of memories, of love, of a life shared. Beneath Beatrice's number, another name caught my eye. David Chen, financial advisor. David. He'd handled Richard's portfolio after he was gone. He'd been so kind, so patient with me, explaining the complexities of investments and trusts. Richard trusted him implicitly. I recalled, the memory a bittersweet ache, and Richard's judgment was never wrong. I added David's name to the note, the act a small, defiant gesture against the rising tide of despair. They thought I was a burden, a doddering old woman they could manipulate. They thought I was oblivious to their schemes. They were wrong. The rain outside intensified, the wind howling like a banshee, but the storm inside me was beginning to subside, replaced by a steely resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them take what was rightfully mine, what I'd worked for my entire life, and more importantly, I wouldn't let them jeopardize my grandson's future. They were counting on my silence, my passivity. They were banking on my love for Melissa blinding me to their greed. They underestimated me. I returned to bed, the leather-bound address book clutched in my hand. Sleep still eluded me, but the anxiety had lessened, replaced by a sense of purpose. I had a plan forming, a strategy taking shape in the quiet hours of the night. It was a plan born of necessity, fueled by a grandmother's love and a widow's quiet fury. They saw me as a burden. They saw me as a source of easy money. Soon, they would learn that I was anything but. I closed my eyes, the image of my grandson's smiling faces filling my mind. For them, I would fight. For them, I would win. The faintest hint of a smile played on my lips. The game, my dear Melissa and Ethan, had just begun. Tomorrow, I make my moves. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I dialed Jeanette's number, my hand trembling slightly. Jeanette, dear, I need to talk. It's about Melissa and Ethan. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and comforting. Margaret, what's wrong? You sound upset. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. I overheard something I shouldn't have, about their plans for me for my future. Silence hung heavy on the line before Jeanne gently prompted. What did you hear, Margaret? I recounted the conversation I'd overheard between Melissa and Ethan, their hushed voices discussing selling my house, the very house I'd raised Melissa in, filled with a lifetime of memories. They spoke of moving me into a lovely retirement community, a gilded cage, so they could access the money from the sale, money they clearly felt entitled to. My voice cracked as I finished. They spoke of it as if I wasn't even there. Jeanette's response was immediate. Margaret, that's appalling. They have no right. Her words, though simple, were a balm to my wounded spirit. What can I do, Jeanne? I asked, feeling lost and vulnerable. I feel powerless. You are not powerless, Margaret, Jeanne said firmly. You have options. You have rights. She paused, then continued. I have a friend, a lawyer, specializes in these sorts of situations. Her name is Sarah. She's sharp, discreet, and she knows how to protect her clients. Let me put you in touch with her. A flicker of hope ignited within me. Would you, oh Jeanne? Thank you. I felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. Of course, Margaret. Consider it done. Call Sarah first thing tomorrow. She'll know what steps you can take. We talked for a while longer, Jeanette's calm, practical advice steadying my nerves. By the time we hung up, a plan was beginning to form in my mind, a plan to reclaim my life and secure my future. The next morning, I called Sarah. Her voice, crisp and professional, filled me with a sense of purpose. I explained my situation, the overheard conversation, the implied threat to my independence. She listened patiently, asking pertinent questions, clarifying details. When I finished, she spoke with quiet authority. Margaret, you have several options. We can challenge their power of attorney, ensuring they can't make decisions about your finances without your consent. I hadn't even realized they had power of attorney. When had that happened? It must have been during that flurry of paperwork after my husband passed, when I was still reeling from grief. I had trusted Melissa implicitly. The realization of that misplaced trust stung sharply. Sarah continued, outlining a strategy. We can also create a trust, an irrevocable one, for your grandchildren. This will protect their future, ensure they receive their inheritance, regardless of what Melissa and Ethan might try to do. My grandchildren, thinking of them, of their innocent faces, strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting their future. What about my house? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Can they really just not sell it? Not if we act quickly, Sarah replied. We can restructure your assets, make it far more difficult for them to access your funds. We can explore transferring ownership of the house into the trust as well. The weight on my chest began to lift. For the first time since overhearing that dreadful conversation, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't powerless. I could fight back. Sarah and I discussed the details for over an hour, mapping out a plan of action. I would gather all my financial documents, everything related to my house, my investments, my retirement savings. Sarah would then begin the process of setting up the trust and restructuring my assets. As I hung up the phone, a sense of calm washed over me. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were now tempered by a newfound resolve. I would not let Melissa and Ethan steal my future. I would protect what was mine, and most importantly, I would secure the future of my grandchildren. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds. It felt like a sign, a promise of brighter days ahead. There was still much to do, but for the first time in days, I felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet thrill at the prospect of turning the tables. I had a plan, and I was ready to execute it. The quiet of the morning finally settled after Melissa and the children left for school. I could still hear her parting words, a saccharine "see you later, Mom," ringing in my ears. The same tone she used when discussing my future at Meadowbrook Retirement Community with Ethan. That future, as they envisioned it, involved me relinquishing control of my assets so they could upgrade their lifestyle. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the small locked box hidden beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom closet. Inside were all my important financial documents, deeds, stock certificates, and my will. These papers represented my life's work, my security, and most importantly, my grandchildren's future. I couldn't let Melissa and Ethan squander it all. With a deep breath, I pulled out my old address book. It had been years since I'd spoken to Mr. Caldwell, my financial advisor before my husband passed, but I remembered him as a man of integrity. I hoped he was still the same. Dialing his number, I felt a surge of nervous energy. What if he had retired? What if he couldn't or wouldn't help me? Caldwell and Associates, a crisp voice answered. Hello, I said, my voice shaking a little. Could I speak with Mr. Caldwell, please? It's Margaret Hayes. A brief pause, then 1 moment. Mrs. Hayes. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited. Finally, a familiar voice came on the line. Margaret, it's been ages. How are you, Mr. Caldwell? I replied, relief flooding through me. It's good to hear your voice. I need your help. I explained my situation, the words tumbling out in a rush. I told him about overhearing Melissa and Ethan's plans, their casual disregard for my feelings, and their eagerness to get their hands on my money. I described their talk of new cars and lavish vacations, all funded by my life savings. I understand, Mr. Caldwell said calmly when I'd finished. This is a difficult situation, Margaret, but we can take steps to protect your assets. He listened patiently as I detailed everything: my house, my retirement savings, the small stock portfolio my husband had left me. "The first thing we need to do is schedule a meeting," Mr. Caldwell advised. "Bring all your financial documents with you." "Of course," I agreed, already feeling a glimmer of hope. "When are you available?" We arranged a meeting for the following week. I spent the next few days in a flurry of activity, organizing my documents, making lists, and trying to anticipate every possible question Mr. Caldwell might ask. I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement, like a tightrope walker stepping onto a high wire. This was a huge risk, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself and my grandchildren. "Grandma, what are you doing?" My granddaughter, Lily, peeked into my room, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Just some paperwork, sweetheart," I said, quickly closing the box of documents. I didn't want to burden her with the details of my predicament. "Can I help?" she asked, her small hand reaching out. "Not today, honey," I said, forcing a smile. "Maybe another time." I ruffled her hair and sent her off to play. Looking at her, I knew I was doing the right thing. I had to fight for her future, for a life free from the shadow of Melissa and Ethan's greed. Mr. Caldwell had suggested setting up an irrevocable trust for the children, a way to ensure their education and well-being were taken care of, regardless of what happened to me or my assets. It was a complex process, he'd warned, but one that would offer the best protection. The day of the meeting arrived quickly. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach as I drove to Mr. Caldwell's office. He greeted me warmly, his reassuring presence calming my nerves. We spent hours going over my finances, discussing options, and strategizing. He explained the intricacies of the trust fund, emphasizing the importance of keeping it confidential. He also suggested I revoke Melissa's power of attorney, a document she'd convinced me to sign years ago, claiming it would be easier for her to manage my affairs. At the time, it had seemed like a harmless gesture of trust. Now it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" Mr. Caldwell asked, sensing my hesitation. "This will sever any financial control your daughter has." "Yes," I said firmly. "I have to protect my grandchildren's future." The process took weeks, filled with phone calls, paperwork, and meetings. I felt like I was living a double life, smiling and nodding at Melissa while secretly working to dismantle her plans. The guilt gnawed at me, but I knew I couldn't waver. The thought of Melissa and Ethan controlling my money, spending it on frivolous things while my grandchildren's future hung in the balance, spurred me on. Finally, everything was in place. The trust was established, funded, and secured. Melissa's power of attorney was revoked. My assets were safe, and my grandchildren's future was protected. I hadn't told Mr. Caldwell everything yet. There was one final piece to the puzzle, a small, almost insignificant detail that held the key to my ultimate revenge. And that, I decided, would be my little secret, for now. A small smile played on my lips as I drove home, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life and ensure a brighter future for my grandchildren. The first step was done. I had secured their future. Now, it was time to deal with Melissa and Ethan. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my living room rug, a stark contrast to the coldness that had settled in my heart. I called Melissa down, trying to keep my voice even. "Melissa, dear, could you come down for a moment? There's something we need to discuss." She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "What is it, Mom?" "I'm in the middle of something. This won't take long," I replied, gesturing for her to sit on the sofa. She perched on the edge, her impatience radiating. "I've decided to consult with Mr. Henderson about my finances," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Mr. Henderson was an old family friend and a highly respected lawyer, someone I knew Melissa and Ethan wouldn't be able to manipulate. Her eyes widened slightly, the frown deepening. "Mr. Henderson? Why, what's wrong with Ethan handling everything?" Ethan, with his slick-back hair and practiced charm, had wormed his way into managing my affairs shortly after marrying Melissa. Now, knowing their true intentions, the thought of him having access to my life savings made my stomach churn. "Nothing's wrong," I said, maintaining my composure. "But it's always a good idea to have independent legal counsel, especially when dealing with matters as important as these." I picked up a small stack of documents I'd prepared earlier, mostly brochures from retirement communities Ethan had been pushing me towards. I'd like Mr. Henderson's opinion on a few things. Melissa shifted uneasily. "Mom, really, this seems unnecessary. Ethan's been doing a great job. He has your best interests at heart." Her voice held a note of pleading, almost desperation, that confirmed my suspicions. They were counting on me to remain complacent, to trust them blindly. "I'm sure he has, dear," I said softly, but as I said, it never hurts to have a second opinion. "I've already scheduled an appointment for tomorrow afternoon." A flicker of panic crossed her face. "Tomorrow? That's so soon. Can't you reschedule? Ethan could come with you, explain everything." Her voice trailed off, the realization dawning on her that I was taking back control. "That won't be necessary, Melissa," I said firmly. "I'd prefer to speak with Mr. Henderson privately first. Then, if there are any questions, we can all sit down together and discuss them." Melissa stood abruptly, her hands clenched at her sides. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "You're acting like we're trying to steal from you or something." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. I met her gaze steadily. "I simply want to ensure everything is handled correctly, Melissa, for everyone's benefit, including the children's." The mention of her children seemed to deflate her anger somewhat. She knew how much I adored my grandchildren, how I would do anything to secure their future. "Fine," she muttered, turning towards the stairs. "Do whatever you want, but don't be surprised if Ethan is upset by this. I'll manage," I replied calmly, watching her retreat. As soon as she was out of sight, I let out a long, slow breath. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I'd anticipated, but it was a necessary step. I needed to make it clear that I was no longer a pawn in their game. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Henderson's number, a sense of resolve hardening my voice. "Hello, Charles. It's Margaret Hayes. I'm ready to move forward with those arrangements we discussed." I glanced out the window at the setting sun, a small smile playing on my lips. The game had changed, and I was finally holding all the cards. My meeting with Mr. Henderson was just the beginning. They thought they were about to inherit everything. They had no idea what I had planned for my grandchildren's future, and just how little they would be receiving. The crisp morning air invigorated me as I stepped into Mr. Caldwell's office the next day. "Good morning, Margaret." His receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you. Please go right in." I nodded my thanks and walked towards his office, a sense of purpose filling me. This was it. This was the beginning of securing my future, and more importantly, the future of my grandchildren. "Margaret, so good to see you." Mr. Caldwell rose from his chair, extending his hand. "Please, have a seat." I settled into the plush leather chair opposite him, my handbag clutched firmly in my lap. "So, shall we begin?" he asked, opening a thick file on his desk. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, let's. I've prepared all the necessary documents for the trust, as we discussed," he explained, sliding a stack of papers across the desk towards me. "This establishes an irrevocable trust for your grandchildren, with you as the trustee." He pointed to various sections, explaining the legalities in clear, concise language, "and I've initiated the process of liquidating your assets as you requested." My heart pounded in my chest. It felt surreal, almost like a dream, to be taking back control. For so long, I had felt powerless, at the mercy of Melissa and Ethan's whims. This ensures that the funds will be managed solely for their benefit, he continued, and completely inaccessible to anyone else. I met his gaze, a quiet strength building within me. "That's precisely what I want," I confirmed, my voice firm. We spent the next few hours meticulously reviewing the documents, ensuring every detail was in place. Mr. Caldwell patiently answered all my questions, explaining the implications of each clause and provision. "Now, about the transfer of your house title," he began, his tone serious. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this? It's a significant step." "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "I've thought it through very carefully. This house seats my last remaining asset, and I need to protect it for my grandchildren's future." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Very well. We'll finalize the transfer today, then. This will ensure that the property is also included in the trust, offering them even greater security." As the final signatures were penned and the documents officially notarized, a wave of relief washed over me. It was done. My grandchildren's future was secure. A weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You've given me peace of mind." "It's been my pleasure, Margaret," he replied, a reassuring smile on his face. "Please know, I'm always here if you need anything further." I gathered my belongings, a newfound sense of confidence in my step. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where I was in control. As I left Mr. Caldwell's office, I decided to take a detour. I drove to the local bank, the one where I had originally set up the joint account with Melissa. Walking into the cool, marble lobby, I approached a teller. "I'd like to close this account," I stated, sliding the account card across the counter. The teller looked surprised. "Certainly, ma'am. May I see your identification?" I provided my driver's license and signed the necessary paperwork. Watching the teller process the closure, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was another step towards reclaiming my independence, another piece of my life I was taking back. After leaving the bank, I drove home, a quiet sense of anticipation bubbling inside me. I knew I would have to tell Melissa and Ethan eventually, but not yet. I wanted to enjoy this moment, savor the knowledge that I had outsmarted them. I parked the car in the driveway and walked into the house. It felt different now, no longer a place of simmering resentment, but a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe freely. I went into the kitchen and started preparing dinner, humming a tune I hadn't sung in years. The aroma of roasting chicken filled the air, a comforting scent that reminded me of simpler times. As I set the table, I couldn't help but smile. This was my house, my life, and I was finally taking it back. The front door opened, and Melissa and Ethan walked in. They looked surprised to see me already home. "Mom, you're back early," Melissa commented, her eyes darting around the room. "Yes," I replied calmly, placing a bowl of salad on the table. "I had a productive day." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, doing what?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "Just taking care of some personal business," I answered, a knowing smile playing on my lips. They exchanged a nervous glance, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that the game was about to begin. The crisp afternoon sun slanted through the blinds in Ms. Albright's office, painting stripes across her polished mahogany desk. I watched as she meticulously reviewed the thick stack of documents, her pen occasionally pausing to underline a clause or make a small, precise notation in the margin. "Just a few more signatures, Margaret," she said, her voice calm and reassuring, "and everything will be finalized." I nodded, my heart still pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "Thank you, Ms. Albright," I replied, "for everything." She smiled gently. "It's my pleasure, Margaret. You deserve to have peace of mind." She slid the first document towards me, a new will. This one named my grandchildren, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, as the sole beneficiaries of my estate. Seeing their names printed there in official legal typeface brought a wave of calm over me. This was what mattered, protecting their future. "This ensures that everything goes to Lily and Tom?" I asked, wanting to be absolutely certain. Ms. Albright nodded, "Directly to them, held in trust until they reached the age of 25. Your daughter, Melissa, will have no access whatsoever." I signed my name with a steady hand, the ink flowing dark and decisive on the page. The next document was the revocation of Melissa's power of attorney. Thinking back to the conversation I'd overheard between Melissa and Ethan, their casual dismissal of my concerns, their plans to sell my house out from under me, a cold knot formed in my stomach. "This means she can no longer access my accounts," I clarified, my voice barely a whisper. "That's correct," Ms. Albright confirmed. "Your finances are now solely under your control." I signed that document with even more conviction. It was a small act of defiance, a reclaiming of my own life. Ms. Albright then presented me with the final document, the confirmation of the irrevocable trust she had established for Lily and Tom, funded by the proceeds from the sale of my stock portfolio. It was a substantial sum, enough to secure their education, their future. This was the part that made my breath catch in my throat. This is all for them? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Every penny, Ms. Albright assured me. This trust is designed to provide for their education, their health care, and their general well-being. And as per your instructions, a portion will be set aside for their first homes. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I hadn't dared to dream of being able to do this for them. I'd been so worried about becoming a burden, about being left with nothing. And now, because of these papers, because of Ms. Albright's help, their future was secure. I signed my name one last time, a shaky signature this time, blurred slightly by the tears I could no longer hold back. It's done, Ms. Albright said softly, handing me a tissue. Everything is in place. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. I had taken back control. I had protected my grandchildren. Thank you, I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. Thank you so much. I gathered my belongings, my hands trembling slightly as I stood to leave. Miss Albright put a hand on my arm. Margaret, she said, her voice gentle, you are a strong woman. You've done what's best for your family. Her words warmed me, bolstering my resolve. I managed a small smile. I had to, I replied, for Lily and Tom. I walked out of Ms. Albright's office and into the bright sunshine, a new sense of purpose filling me. I wasn't sure what the future held, what Melissa's reaction would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready. I had secured my grandchildren's future, and that was all that mattered. I had one last stop to make before going home, a visit to the bank. It was time to withdraw a little something for myself, a little nest egg for a new beginning. After all, I deserved it. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains of my new suite, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. A soft knock echoed from the door. Mother, Melissa's voice, sharp with an edge I hadn't heard before, cut through the quiet. Open this door. We need to talk. I smoothed the wrinkles from my silk dressing gown, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Melissa stood there, Ethan hovering just behind her, his usual jovial fawade replaced with a grin set to his jaw. What seems to be the problem? I asked, keeping my voice even. Melissa pushed past me, Ethan trailing in her wake. Problem. My credit card was just declined at the grocery store. Declined. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I'm sure it was unpleasant, I replied, gesturing towards the comfortable armchairs in the sitting area. Please sit down. Melissa ignored the offer, pacing back and forth. Unpleasant. It was mortifying. I had a cart full of groceries, including little Timmy's special formula, and I had to leave it all there. What is going on, Mother? Ethan, now seated, nervously ran a hand through his thinning hair. Margaret, he began, his voice tight. We're worried. This isn't like you. Perhaps not, I said, finally taking a seat opposite them. But things change. I've had some time to reflect these past few weeks, to reassess my priorities. Melissa stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing. Reflect. What is that supposed to mean? I met her gaze directly. It means I've realized the importance of securing my grandchildren's future. Timmy and Sarah deserve a stable, secure upbringing, free from the uncertainties of their parents' financial situation. Melissa sputtered. Our financial situation? What are you talking about? We're doing fine. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I sighed. Melissa, dear, let's not pretend. I've been covering your mortgage payments for the past 6 months. And Ethan's business ventures, let's just say I've been more than generous. The color drained from Melissa's face. How did you? I overheard your conversation a few weeks ago. I admitted calmly, the one where you discussed selling my house and moving me into that charming retirement community. Ethan looked down at his hands, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of the chair. Melissa opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. No need for explanations. I understand. You thought I was a naive old woman, easily manipulated. I'm not. I reached for a small, leather-bound folder on the side table and handed it to Melissa. This explains everything. She hesitantly opened it, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents. What is this? She stammered. This is a copy of the irrevocable trust I've established for Timmy and Sarah. I explained. It contains the majority of my assets, my house, my retirement savings, my stock portfolio. It's designed to provide for their education, their health care, their future. You and Ethan have no access to these funds. Melissa's face crumpled. But what about us? She cried, her voice trembling. What are we supposed to do? I looked at her, my heart hardening despite the flicker of sadness I felt. You're adults, Melissa. You and Ethan are capable of providing for yourselves. You'll need to find a way. Perhaps Ethan can finally focus on a stable career. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And the house you've been living in, that's been sold as well. The new owners will be taking possession next month. I've arranged for a small apartment for you. Nothing extravagant, but it will suffice. Consider it a fresh start. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and strained. You've taken everything. I shook my head. No, Ethan. I've protected my grandchildren's future. That's all I've ever wanted. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I'm tired. Please leave. Melissa and Ethan sat there for a moment, stunned into silence. Then slowly they rose and walked out of the suite, leaving me alone with the warm afternoon sun and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my grandchildren, at least, were safe. The silence that followed their departure wasn't empty. It was filled with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Looking out at the cityscape twinkling in the distance, I knew this was a new beginning, not just for me, but for the future of my family, and that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all.